What was the moment you knew your relationship was over? Story 1. You can see it in their eyes when they don't love you anymore. I'll never forget that feeling. Beat me to it. Yeah, the fatal 3-punch combo is when they 1. Stop texting or calling you, 2. Dump you, then 3. Look at you with no affection in their eyes when you meet up one more time to talk things over. When things happen in that sequence, it means she's not coming back. Something was told to me once that pertains to number 3 in your comment. When a relationship ends, there is almost always a grieving period for both parties. However, they don't start and end at the same time. The person who ends the relationship is probably already nearing the end of their grieving period. Theirs started when they first decided to end things. However, they probably didn't immediately jump to breaking it off. They let it simmer for a while until they were finally ready to end it. So, when they finally do finish the job, they are already much further down the path to moving on than the person they are breaking up with. That person is just now starting the grieving period. The person who ended the relationship has probably stopped complaining about the relationship too, realizing nothing will change. Instead, the energy is focused on making plans for the breakup. The other party is lulled into thinking everything is finally running smoothly. It's so easy to be in denial about how bad everything is going in a relationship. Story 2. When she came up on caller ID and my first thought was, ugh. Once a month, my ex-wife would have to work one shift that was 2 hours later than usual. On a normal day, she'd get home about 30 minutes before me. The days that she would work late became my favorite days because that meant I actually had a chance to relax and unwind at the end of each workday instead of immediately having a dump truck of negativity unloaded on me when I walked in the door. Man, I know about that dump truck of negativity when I get home from work. It's like she stores it up all day, and when I park the truck, it triggers the deluge. Everybody else gets the nice, friendly, funny, helpful version. I get the negativity. Sometimes I ask her to talk to me like she would a complete stranger. It doesn't go over well, but that's marriage, especially once you get past 20 years. I fill that role for her, and she gives me companionship and is a great partner when I need her to be, for the most part. I keep my stress and worry largely to myself, probably why I had a heart attack and a triple bypass. Still, she moved out to the middle of nowhere in the woods for my dream. I understand she has dreams too, and I hope to make them come true. Just to address some of the comments, yes, we moved out to BFE, but our daughter's family lives less than a mile away and the 3 grandbabies visit all the time. The joy of our lives. My wife has a ton of friends out in the country. She makes friends easily because she's non-judgmental, funny, and agreeable. She also gets pretty much everything she asks for. We have horses, peacocks, multiple dogs, whatever which makes her happy. And while I could retire comfortably, I have visions of my life becoming an endless honey-do list. Not exactly what I had in mind. I keep encouraging her to get involved in something that keeps her busy and get her away for a while, but she's not interested. Meanwhile, we have a lifestyle that ain't cheap. Somebody has to pay for it, so I'll probably keep working until I keel over if I'm lucky. I'm way better off than lots of folks. Worked hard to get here, and really am focused on helping others, including my wife. God bless you all for the positive support here. There was this girl I had a huge crush on. Like, I loved her. It got extremely toxic, and every time she'd call me, I'd get anxious. In fact, it was so bad, I'd start getting anxious when I knew she was about to call me. She used to call me around 7 every day, and this anxiety lasted even after we weren't talking as much anymore. Truly messed me up. I think, whenever I get a call. I just hate calls. Story 3. I was at my best friend's wedding. When he saw his bride walking down the aisle, he had a grin so big, it looked like it could have exploded right off of his face. He was so happy to be marrying this person. And when I thought about my now ex-girlfriend, I realized I just didn't feel that way about her. I will say, when I married my wife, I was grinning like an idiot. I dated a guy I thought was the guy I was going to marry. I had a dream that we got married, and it felt like a nightmare. Cold sweats and everything. We ended up breaking up, thank God. I met my now husband a year or so later and had a similar dream. It was a great dream. It's how I knew he was the one. It's been 15 years and we're expecting our 4th child, and he still makes me happy. When I married my wife, one of our best friends got ordained to perform the ceremony. Intimate, small, outdoor wedding. After he heard our vows, he broke up with his girlfriend later that night because he could never imagine saying anything remotely similar to her. We wrote our own vows, and I dare say they were very good and quite romantic. One of my coworkers, who was at my wedding, told me about noticing my smile smile when my wife was walking down the aisle. I think it's funny because I was so used to putting on a show in public so no one would know how crappy my relationship was that I could fake it enough that this woman who was maybe 30 years older than me and married for forever was buying it. Kind of sad to think about the exact same thing happening but being the exact opposite. My ex was a groomsman at a wedding. I remember sitting there hearing the couple exchanging vows and thinking, holy crap, I have no idea what that feels like, while also desperately trying to avoid making eye contact with the ex who was tearing up and definitely trying to have a moment with me from across the room. At a certain age, if you don't see yourself marrying a person, it probably isn't going to last. Story 4. My ex and I were not living together, but he had the key to my place. I told him that I was going to go see my parents for the weekend, but then changed my mind last minute because I started feeling sick. I forgot to tell him and just went home after work and went to bed. I woke up around 10 p.m. to get a glass of water, and while I was in the kitchen, I heard someone fumbling at the door with the lock. I freaked out because I lived on the 17th floor, so if it was a break-in, I was messed up. All of a sudden, he walks in, dragging a tipsy girl in behind him. I just stood there while he tried to make up some sort of excuse as to why he was there. The girl was pretty shocked too. One time, my boyfriend at the time was borrowing my bedding while I was out of town. I go out of town for months at a time for work, so it didn't matter. Turns out he brought a girl over. He literally screwed a girl on my bedding. And to get her to like him more, he told her that he had a green thumb and boasted about the aloe plant he grew. He was watering my aloe plants over the time I was gone and nearly killed them. Then later on, he started dating the girl he cheated on me with. I had no idea who she was, but I was distraught. Luckily, the super sweet girl was there and told me he was stupid and worthless and I'd get over him. Turns out she knew who I was. She was the girl who my ex cheated on me with, and with that knowledge, she still sat there in my house as I cried my eyes out. I also later found out she knew he was in a relationship when they got together. Things went very sour very quickly after that. If there is a hell, I hope to one day personally drag her and him down into it. When my husband and I were first together, I had some housing issues and was staying with him temporarily while he worked offshore on oil rigs. We were established as non-exclusive, but I wasn't really seeking anyone else. I'd always tell him when he got home how I made sure to wash the sheets. He finally asked me about it since bringing guys to his place wasn't really cool. I didn't even consider that as an interpretation. LOL. I just had my dog with me and the dog slept in the bed while he was gone, and the dog was dealing with a skin issue and shedding really bad, so making the bed extra gross. Story 5. The day my mom passed away, the coroner hadn't even come for her body yet. With zero consideration of how I felt and what I was going through, my ex-fiancé thought it was a great idea and a good time to tell me he had been cheating on me for the last 6 months, and how sorry he was for it. He wasn't sorry he did it, but he was sorry because the other woman had lied to him about who she really was, and he wanted me to comfort him because he felt betrayed by her. When I promptly broke up with him, he asked, "Wait, is this really goodbye? How could you do this to me now?" This same thing happened to my mom's best friend, only instead of her mom passing, it was right before she went into surgery. They'd been together for nearly 50 years. She forgave him, but mostly only because she literally needed him to help her get around for a few months following the surgery and didn't have anyone else. He ended up reconciling with the woman a few months later and left my mom's friend anyway. I was in the ER with my ex and found out I had Crohn's disease, which is genetic. I was so sad that any kids I might have would have to go through what I was going through. I was dramatically underweight and knocking on death's door. Doctors leave, and it's just me and my fiancé in the room, and she shares with me how sad she is because this will impact her ability to travel. I am in agony, bleeding out of my ass, unable to eat, nauseous, maxing out on Dilaudid, and that woman is concerned that she can't travel. Yeah, that's gonna be a no for me, dog. Narcissists are the worst. My now wife left her husband because he is incapable of empathy. How do people get messed up like this? I just don't get it. I know I'm not perfect, but Jesus Christ, I hope you made it through and are doing better, and with someone who can actually love you. Not to that extent, but my grandmother died suddenly. I was 19 or 20 and living with my parents. My parents got the call at 9 p.m. while we were all sitting around having a good time. Understandably, they loaded up and left. They left me at home to watch the house and work and go to school. 2 days later, we went to a barbecue interview with his family, and he was bothered because I wasn't my usual talkative, outgoing self. 2 days after that, he came to my parents while I was home alone and told me I was too emotionally dependent on him. He said he wasn't ready for the commitment. I found out later that he had cheated on me. Some people really aren't deserving of love or companionship. Story 6. When I saw how she completely changed when her boss was around. She became much more pleasant, flirty, and amenable. That's when I realized the only reason she was dating me was in hopes it would make her boss jealous enough to leave his wife for her. I do not understand how people think you can date someone else and it'll make the person you actually want more attracted to you. Not even getting into how damned messed up that is, leading someone on like a prop. I just don't even see how it makes any practical sense. I guess that probably works on some personality types though. Sounds a lot like Skylar from Breaking Bad. Story 7. When she started being cold to me and being unsure about our relationship, then she started talking about this guy from her class. You know the rest. Mine was when she casually started hanging out with the college weed man, which soon turned into dating as soon as she dumped me, like the day after. It sucked, but I mean, the silver lining, it turned out about as well as you'd expect, lol. And here I am a few years later dating a super sweet chill woman. Bullet dodged. Oh yeah, I missed that sign too. A short, impish looking kid with a creeper's personality I thought couldn't possibly be a threat. They're married. Thank God, his racist mother-in-law could have been my living nightmare. Same here, but it was a guy from her work. She forgot she was sharing a photo album with me, so like a week later I started seeing pictures of them together and pictures of love notes. It devastated me. They moved in together in less than a month. Last I heard, he failed hard trying to make it as a Twitch streamer, and they're both stuck working 60+ hours per week at minimum wage. Meanwhile, I have just completed my nursing degree and began my career. I'm the happiest I've ever been. Same thing happened to me almost a year ago. She started a new job and wouldn't stop talking about the nice young doctor working with her. Stopped talking about him a month in, and also stopped having sex with me. She broke it off some months later. They are now dating. Yeah, I am, or certainly was, naive. Oldest story in the book. Story 8. Hanging out with them feels often like a chore than something you're excited about. Walking on eggshells to avoid them getting mad, they don't match your efforts like they used to. Noticing they don't listen while you're talking, they don't feel like home anymore. They download Tinder and see people, they cheat on you. My boyfriend and I had a 2-month rough patch last year. He's bipolar and unmedicated, and I was just starting on antidepressants. The SSRI phase, you know, constantly wanting to neck myself. Anyway, we both felt the 5 things, no Tinder or cheating, but then we just stopped, looked at each other, and focused on the small spark we had left. Now we're better than ever and are actually communicating on a regular basis. We have little therapy sessions with each other every week. Sometimes it's not the relationship that's over, it's the things outside the relationship polluting it. People always end up feeling like this around me. I try to do my best to get better and react better, more peacefully, but people seem to be scared of me regardless. I think walking on eggshells has less to do with the person being talked to rather than the person doing the talking. Just me. Story 9. Married for 21 years. The last 10 were devoid of any love, warmth, or caring. I, a male of 53 years old, did not want to get divorced and figured this was just the way the rest of my life would be. We were taking our 3rd shot at marriage counseling, and after a few months, my wife says she has to quit counseling because she wants to attend a meditation class at the same time. She had something better to do than work on our marriage. That's when it hit me that she didn't give a damn at all about our marriage, and I decided that I did not want that to be the rest of my life. We are currently 2.5 years into divorce. It's painful and expensive, but personally, I've never been happier. I am leading my best life. So glad I decided to move on. My mom has been in a relationship like this for almost as long as she's been in the relationship. I feel like she thinks she's too old to find happiness within herself, or a new relationship at her age. The lady is only 60. I wish she would move on and realize that she still has a chance of living some good years instead of living in a cold and bitter relationship devoid of affection and genuine passion. Find your joy. Everyone at every age deserves it. Let it go. The best 3 words outside of I love you that have worked wonders in my wellness journey. 21 years of marriage down the drain. Damn. Story 10. We had been long distance for a couple of months, and I actually felt relieved to be hundreds of miles away from him. He never called me or texted. It was always me who reached out. I got tired of it and started calling less and less. One day, after we hadn't spoken for a few weeks, I called him and he answered and sounded surprised to hear from me. The conversation went, me. Hey, it's me. Him. Oh, hi? Why are you calling me? Me. No reason, just to say hi. Him. Oh, okay, well, I was actually just doing something. Can I call you another day? And after years of awful screaming arguments and stupid games, that's when I knew the relationship was dead. Something similar happened to me not many years ago. Thank God I got out of that relationship in less than 2 years. It was making me exhausted, self-conscious, and irritated, since I was all the time carrying this feeling of not being that important. And the excuses I heard. I had a similar relationship, but we weren't long distance. He wasn't like that at the start. I think he got complacent. Then he started barely putting in any effort to reach out to me. I always initiated our dates, held his hand first, texted him first, etc. I kept going because I wanted to believe we could work it out. Eventually I got sick of it and started texting him less, which led to us often not talking for days. Then one day when I raised the issue about his lack of effort, his reply was, "You don't reply to my texts either," but I don't say anything about it. God, I was so pissed. I stopped replying only because he showed he didn't care. And then he wanted to use the outcome of his actions against me. The worst relationships are those where only one person cares. Story 11. He stopped talking to me 3 days into a 3 weeks holiday. I made the best of it. Once home, the silent treatment continued for another 3 weeks. He rolls over in bed one morning and starts talking like nothing happened. I should have ended it long before, but that was the moment I knew it was over. The way it works is very depressing. I stay in the room on my own. I go out to eat on my own. I read my books, go to the pool, essentially have the holiday by myself. And then when it's time to go, we both pack. He probably would have said something very minimal like we're leaving at X time tomorrow, and I would just follow along like a stupid lost sheep. And yeah, it was weird. That honestly baffles me more than anything. Silent treatment for a few days? Okay. Silent treatment for 6 weeks over nothing? I'm sure it was the "this is the end" moment for you, but I would also be a bit like, what? Yeah man, he never thought it was over nothing. This particular incident was because I was looking for a specific pair of trainers in a sports store. I had a picture of them, and he was helping me look and kept bringing me ones that were nothing like the picture. So I said, "Stop bringing me all the shoes. I'm looking for these exact ones." I was mostly joking because it was just funny, but he huffed over it, and that was that for 6 weeks. The whole 5-year relationship was a bit, what? Really looking back. Silent treatment was the tip of the iceberg, really. That's indeed over nothing. Wow, I'm sorry for you. I kind of would have understood it if he had been hurt really badly, but an everyday conflict like this, that wouldn't have worked for long. My SO and I sometimes fight over wanting to help the other one and failing terribly at it, but we can clear this up an hour later. I can't even comprehend something like that. Wow. Story 12. When he proposed to me in front of a crowd of over 3,000 people at a job we both worked at, just 2 weeks after we had gotten into one of the worst fights we had ever had. What was the topic of the fight? He had joked about proposing, and I told him I didn't feel ready to be married. The relationship lasted for about 6 months after that, but the ring never felt like anything more than a shackle. This is one thing I am so thankful to my BF about. He understands and accepts that I am never going to be ready to be married again. I'll love him until the sun explodes, but after my last marriage, I'll never even possibly run the risk of being put in that same situation ever again. I was married for 10 years, and he gaslit me to the point that I had to keep an "I'm not crazy" notebook to keep track of what he said, because he'd try to make me believe that he never said things to me that I clearly remember him saying. He was verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive. I have pics of bruises he left on me. He cheated on me with multiple women, had a spending problem and racked up thousands in debt, and would berate me and curse me until I fled the house to get away from him anytime I asked him to get help to stop, and lied to me about everything. It started so well because he basically figured out what I was looking for in a partner and played the part perfectly until we married. And then it was suddenly like he was a different person and was still a charming person to everyone else and a crabhead behind the scenes. I can understand your struggle with it because to some people marriage is a very important part of the relationship cycle, but my experience absolutely ruined me of ever wanting to be legally bound to someone ever again because it was a nightmare to disentangle myself from, and I'm still dealing with him holding up his part of the divorce agreement over a year after the divorce was finalized. It's not you that your boyfriend is wary of, it's the feeling feeling of how the past still affects him that he's wary of. Who thinks, yeah, she can't say no in front of all these people, it's a perfect plan? Story 13. When we bought a house together and I proposed that same day we closed. The next day she did a 180 and was completely different. Stuck it out for almost 3 years, but I had enough of the horrible treatment. Tried to tell her that I'm her partner and not another child in the house. Never got through to her. So, any tips? Not for me, but I have a friend in this exact situation, and there's a kid involved. He won't leave her because of the little guy. It's not even his kid. He's a really good dude, but we're in our 30s, and wasting our lives on someone for the sake of a child that's not yours, as admirable as that may be, I'm starting to think in 10 years he's going to really regret it. It's ultimately his choice, but man, I have a really bad feeling for him. He gets talked at like a child, not talked to like a spouse. Let me tell you a story about sticking with it because of the kids. A guy I worked with found out his wife was sleeping with another guy. He wanted a divorce, but she kinda played him, swore it would never happen again. We should stay together for the kids, etc. So he did. This was in California, by the way. Okay, so they stayed together for a long time. Years. Then he caught her doing it again. She'd been doing it for years. She just happened to have gotten away with it for a long time. Okay, he'd had enough. Filed for divorce. But then it was years later, they'd been married for over 20 years by this time and the kids were nearly raised. This becomes important. She never made much money. She was mostly a stay-at-home mom. He had a pretty good job, but she spent money like it was water and he took a second job, doing taxes for H&R Block for extra cash. This is California, which has some pretty powerful community property and spousal support laws and policies. The way it was explained to me, in a divorce, the spouse that's entitled to spousal support, usually but not always the wife, gets alimony for 1 year for every 2 years of the marriage, up to 20 years. So, if you were married for 10 years, she gets 5 years of alimony, but after 20 years, it's forever. So since they had been married for over 20 years, in the divorce, she was awarded alimony forever. Plus, she got half his pension. Plus, she had to take out and pay for life insurance with her as a beneficiary. Expensive as hell since he was a diabetic. After the divorce, she lived with the boyfriend she was cheating on him with but wouldn't marry because that would end her alimony. After 5 years, he got cancer, died, and she got his insurance. What he told me was that if he had only gotten divorced when he first knew his marriage was crap, he'd have paid alimony for a few years and would have been done with it. But he stayed and had to pay it forever. And he said the kids were miserable growing up with parents that clearly didn't even like each other, and told him later that it would have been better for everyone if they'd had just gotten divorced. You're not doing yourself or the kids any favors by sticking it out. Staying for the kids often ends up giving the kids a lifetime of trauma. Story 14. When her dad, whom I had just met, told her to stop being a B or she would lose me. Looking back at it, she was being a total B, but it was her dad saying it that opened my eyes. We broke up after her parents left. My worst ex's dad did the same thing. We were hanging out at her dad's house on Easter a few years ago, and she got annoyed with me because I was getting along really well with her dad. She would get very jealous whenever I was getting along with someone she knew for some reason. She started being very rude, and I was just used to it at that point, so I was just taking it, waiting for her to calm down. All of a sudden, her dad says, "Why are you talking to him like that? Don't treat him like that. That's not right. He hasn't even done anything." It was an eye-opening moment for sure. Spent around 2 more years with her after that though, because I'm apparently a glutton for punishment. She seemed like she loved it at first because I was the first relationship she'd had that her dad approved of. Her last ex before me was an abusive piece of crap and broke her ribs, blacked her eyes, etc. Her dad ended up going to the guy's house and throwing him through a sliding glass door after the ex-boyfriend put her in the hospital once. Her ex almost bled out and died. Her dad was a really tough blue-collar guy from the Bronx in New York City, and we were both nervous about him meeting me because she made it seem like her dad was this hardcore, scary badass. Turns out, he was a badass, but he just liked respectful guys, and wanted to make sure I wasn't going to abuse or take advantage of his daughter. We instantly became friends. We had the same view on politics. He was a longtime union electrician and liberal, and we loved to talk about union history and how they're important important for workers' rights, and the same taste in movies, beer, etc. I used to ask him for advice and treated him like a surrogate father because my dad died when I was young. We'd stay up late talking or watching old movies that my ex thought were boring. Once we got to the point we were super close, my ex got pissed for some reason. She thought I was stealing her dad. I'll still miss that guy. He was really fun to talk to, and listening to his stories about growing up as a white dude from the Bronx in New York City decades ago, before the city was cleaned up and made safer, was fascinating. My brother has an adult daughter who is very similar to her mother, his crazy ex, and my brother had a sit-down with her boyfriend who was planning on proposing and said, "I've been through this. I can hear you begging her to be pleasant every night. This will only get worse, and you need to run." The young man chose wisely to end it with her the next day. Plus, they are only like 19 and have no business getting married anyway. But seriously, when the girl's father tells you to leave, you know you gotta listen. Story 15. We took a break, and I realized I was so much happier just doing my own thing. We were 23 and had been dating for 6 years. She had graduated college, and I was finishing up. Something kind of similar for me. Dated for 3 years, did long distance for 1, and within that year, I realized I was happy by myself and wanted to explore my life as an individual rather than a couple. There was nothing wrong. We get along. We don't fight a bunch. We care about and trust each other, and nobody was abusive. It just wasn't the right time. Mine was sort of the same. I was in my last year of college and he couldn't tell me what he wanted, other than moving in with him in our hometown, and he thought I should get some crappy job there to support us. He was going to work as well, but in our field of study. I gave him an ultimatum that I wasn't going to throw away my career chances unless I had something more concrete. Then I realized that I didn't care if he chose to marry me or break up with me, and thought that was a pretty crappy way to decide the rest of my life. Sometimes a break is all a relationship needs. Just ask Rachel and Ross. Story 16. We'd had our ups and downs for the better part of 8 months. One day, we met for lunch and she sat down and started talking. All of a sudden, it was like I woke up from a dream and realized I wasn't attracted to or interested in them at all. There had been much worse moments, so it was surprising it happened during everyday conversation. This is how it happened to me. It wasn't any of the times we argued or anything. It was a sunny day and we had grilled out and we were sitting on my porch, and I looked up at him and realized I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't happy either. We'd become comfortable pieces of furniture to each other. That's super similar to my situation. I was discussing my thoughts on being polyamorous with my therapist, and she asked me, if you found someone you liked better than your partner, what would you do? Then it was like all of the doubts about my relationship from the previous year flooded my brain, and I realized that I was holding the relationship out of obligation, and maybe I hadn't even been that interested in her from the get-go. But the same experience of waking up out of a dream, even if there were way worse parts where I could have woken up. Story 17. I was engaged to my girlfriend of 5.5 years, 3.5 dating to engaged. I noticed that out of nowhere she started acting very suspicious and more cautious of her phone around me and not wanting me to be around her when she was playing games with people on Discord, which I didn't really care about. I knew something was up when I would tell her I loved her and to have a good day when she would leave for work, and she would just kind of smile and nod. One day I was cleaning up around the house and noticed that she had left her computer open and saw some messages between her and a guy she plays games with, talking about some things that I would rather not repeat. When I confronted her about it, I was gaslit and made out to be crazy. I knew then it was the beginning of the end. A 1.5 years later, I finally had enough evidence and she admitted to cheating on me for 1.5 years, 6 months before our wedding. I'm still not over it after 1.5 years later, and I genuinely don't think I'll be able to trust the same again. I'll be honest, a betrayal like that isn't something you get over, but it dulls over time to the point that you trust someone but are capable of seeing warning signs if they happen to pop up again. That's the hard lesson I learned about trust after I was cheated on. It's not blind, it's something that is earned and maintained. It's okay to give people the benefit of the doubt, but don't ignore your gut if alarms start going off. Stuff like this even ruins future relationships. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you would like to share, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.